For America. We code for America. Code for America is a nonprofit that helps city governments reimagine what they can do with technology in the 21st century. So we work with cities all across the United States and collaborate on cool tools that help them serve their residents better. It is actually not raining at the moment, which I hear is rare for Portland.
Yeah, the cloud is the vapory elephant in the room.
There's
the conference.
I don't know that it's vapory. I think it's fairly corporeal. It's like a pretty solid cloud. There's cloud everywhere.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I thought a lot about the cloud metaphor, and what I like about the metaphor is that if you take a cloud and you split it, like then it's two clouds. But you would still call those subsistent masses clouds in themselves, and that's kind of how the actual cloud works too. Like a data center you refer to as a cloud, but there's still the cloud.
It would make sense in HPC, obviously, the cloud.
You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
It's still an open question if it's still just like a big like marketing enterprisey term. But I don't know. I mean, I do think that there is like a real substantial reality behind it, and there is a set of emerging possibilities that weren't there before that I would, it's a convenient umbrella.
And the nice thing about cloud as a term and why it's important to have different terms that we use to talk about technology is that it informs how we think about it. If we think of the things that we're building our apps on as servers, then we're going to start thinking about servers. We're going to start thinking about hardware. We're going to start thinking about sort of, we'll think about it at that level. But if we think of the cloud, then even though fundamentally we're talking about the same thing, we are a little bit more free to sort of think laterally about, okay, well, we don't necessarily have to think of this as a server farm. Instead, we can think about how we want to, I don't know, it frees us to think a little bit more creatively about how we're using the resources that we have, rather than like thinking about like checklists of like, here are the servers that I have.
Well, it's also a way of turning the hardware question into more of a black box over there you don't care about. So to speak. So like if you're doing things like having like automatic replication, imaging, failover techniques, like things like that, then it means that like well, I mean another thing is like it changes the definition of like what a computer is. So if you're sitting there with some super fancy processor that's running like 100 virtual machines on it, like is a virtual machine a computer? Is a processor a computer? Is a thing inside of a box a computer? If the
real question is, do we have to care whether it's a computer or not? We don't have to care. Instead, we get to think about our app, but more specifically, we get to think about the problem that we're trying to solve. We get to think about the thing that we're trying to build.
Exactly.
Rather than having to worry about infrastructure.
And it's if you're sitting there on your iPhone looking at Google Maps or something, it's there may not be a person in the world that could accurately specify how many machines, physical or virtual, are involved in that simple transaction. And that's pretty interesting. It's this big Hy-Vee kind of thing that no one really understands. But and it like there's been a lot of concern about like, oh, data centers, it's like centralization, and it is. But I think that a lot of the technological changes are going to make enable you to have a data center in the back of a bus, for example. And so then it's like centralization, but then it's rhizomatic, decentralized, centralized data centers. So it's kind of not as scary. We're getting paid for this, right?